One factor that can either strengthen or worsen your gameplay in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate comes down to the setup that you play the game on. Smash Ultimate is already a game that has a set amount of input lag, without including external factors like displays, controllers, and even controller adapters, further increasing both response time and latency. In addition to this, the game's online mode was developed with delay-based netcode in mind, which only further increases the game's frame delay. So in this video, we're going to explore the external factors that you can adjust to ensure your setup for Smash Bros. Ultimate offers precise gameplay. So if you like these types of discussion videos, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. I'll start out with the most common denominator for all Smash players and discuss controllers! There's plenty of them! So much so that players often perceive many different controllers as equal, with no limiting factors. But if you're a vivid competitor as it is, you've learned by now that this couldn't be further from the truth. Think of the quality of your controller as a solid pair of gloves in football. There are plenty to choose from, but there's some that you'd just rather avoid if you're getting serious about the sport. The lineup of supported controllers for Nintendo Switch are plentiful, but it's important that just because you pick one that the console recognizes doesn't necessarily mean that it's best suited for competitive play. We'll start with the notorious Gamecube controller, an option that's become a staple to competitive Smash since the debut of the Gamecube and Smash Bros. Melee. Gamecube controllers offer what is possibly the lowest amount of latency of any controller offered to play Smash Ultimate. There's two components that make for a consistent gameplay experience when considering Gamecube controllers: the specific type of Gamecube controller itself and the adapter it's attached to. So we'll be exploring various adapters later on. Depending on which Gamecube controller you have, you'll either have an unmarked third-party Gamecube controller or the more dependable official Gamecube controller manufactured by Nintendo. It's important to make this distinction if you're unfamiliar with the controller you own, as many players easily mistake their current controllers for official ones. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if the third-party Gamecube controllers wouldn't consistently drop game inputs, but this is a component to these options that makes intense gameplay more inconsistent. These controllers are also identifiable by the controller's overall build quality, with buttons that stick and no markings or labels on the front or the back of the controllers. To identify if your controller is official, you'll want to check for the serial number label on the back of the controller. It'll look something like this, as well as the Nintendo logo that'll be printed on the front and back of the controller's shell. There should be a Nintendo GameCube logo design front and center of the front controller's shell, unless you've managed to get your hands on some custom controller shells where you don't have that. So, if you're not able to tell from the outside of your controller, there's a few simple alternatives you can try. If you're the more ambitious type, you can always open up the controller and see if you can spot the serial number and motherboard version number itself, but other factors include jumping into training mode and testing if you can output a shield with a half press of the trigger buttons. Though some off-brand GameCube controllers offer analog triggers, which is what you're testing them for, most are built with digital triggers, which require you to fully press down the button to output your desired option, which inevitably makes shielding and even parrying more difficult in Smash Ultimate. So, in conclusion, these are trash. They're like the only controller I could never recommend, just throw them out! One final and quite extensive GameCube alternative would be the fob controllers. For those unfamiliar, fob controllers are custom GameCube motherboards modified to utilize Hall effect sensors in comparison to the official GameCube controllers, which are built with potentiometer-based joysticks. Now, if all of that sounds like a bunch of gibberish, it's because it is. So let me explain why that's significant. Both off-brand third-party and official GameCube controllers have one constant issue of inevitably developing snapback in its joysticks. Once a controller is used enough, the joysticks can eventually create a problem where the direction an input is made can accidentally be reversed or misinterpreted as a different option that the player most likely didn't intend on making. Fobs are tournament legal and are utilized by a massive portion of pro players to directly combat this issue, but overall provide better consistency with more accurate inputs. Their survivability to withstand the lifespan of several GameCube controllers makes this the most efficient GameCube controller money can buy. You'd most likely be able to buy these from secondhand online shops or directly off of hardware devs themselves at a regional or major scale tournament. It's also important to mention that some fob controllers don't connect well with certain off-brand adapters, sometimes not connecting to those adapters at all due to compatibility issues. So, To close out this segment, let's explore the GameCube controller adapters respectively. Now, GameCube controller adapters is where things can get messy. Considering that every Smash setup has different adapters, it's important to have your own quality adapter that you could take with you to both local and major scale tournaments. But most importantly, just to have for more solid practice at home. Official GameCube controller adapters will be recognizable in a similar fashion to official GameCube controllers, looking for the serial number on the bottom of the adapter shell, as well as looking for the Nintendo or Wii U logo on the top shell. Wii U. I have not heard that name in years. God, I'm old. Official GameCube adapters have become the standard for competitive Smash since their conception with Smash Bros. 4, but plenty, and I mean plenty, of players, whether by oversight or intention, settle for much cheaper adapters that contribute to dropped inputs. Chances are, if you're new to the competitive Smash scene and you randomly bought a controller adapter just because you needed one, most people end up with adapters that look like these. These adapters are best suited for players who are looking for a more casual experience, but most likely, if you're this far into a video like this, you're here to improve your setup for competition, and in that case, you should consider upgrading to official adapters. You can mostly find them at vintage game stores, second-hand sellers like eBay, or hey, as random as this sounds, maybe there's a person you know that has one lying around somewhere collecting dust and could offer it up to you. Just ask around, you never know. Now, there is one other option that I haven't mentioned yet that is a newfound discovery for me personally, and has especially become useful when competing in online Smash Ultimate tournaments specifically, being the Input Integrity Adapter. Developed by yet another passionate player within the Smash community, SSBM Art, or Julian Bernard, who has developed a custom adapter that surpasses the polling rate of the official GameCube adapters, which is just absolutely crazy to me. These adapters were more specifically developed with Super Smash Bros. Melee in mind, along with its ongoing emulation project Slippy. Though a lot of competitive tournaments don't currently utilize the Input Integrity adapters, they're the most transportable, as well as offer a more consistent gameplay experience within the delay-based online mode within Smash Ultimate. So, if you're a player who's more inclined to play games online with friends, or even competing in an online tournament, the Input Integrity Adapter is my go-to personal recommendation for a new adapter in 2026. They are especially convenient as they can be purchased straight off the developer's website, in comparison to finding an official GameCube adapter second-hand from the options I listed earlier. So do yourself a favor, and pay close attention to these alternatives, and overall, make the selection that best suits your situation. Moving on to Nintendo Switch controllers, we have a plethora of third-party options certified by Nintendo. Some brands to mention involve Hori and PowerA. But do be cautious of these controllers, as they also struggle from the same issues that the third-party GameCube controllers also suffer from. That being stick drifting, button sticking, and additional latency. Nothing much else to say about these though, but players do ultimately decide on some of them if they're just starting out with Smash.
Where is the Joy-Con grip? How long is this going to take?
Joy-Cons and Pro Controllers are both exceptional choices when input latency is concerned. Both controllers can be connected to consoles wirelessly through Bluetooth and offer a reasonable amount of input lag. However, the Pro Controller seems to have one particular issue in comparison to other wired options. If you were paying attention to that graph earlier, yeah, for one reason or another, wired Pro Controllers have the absolute worst latency of any controller for the Switch. It's best to ensure you compete with the Pro Controller wirelessly, and even then, be cautious of Bluetooth interference if you ever find yourself at a major scale tournament. Too many controllers in one collective area could cause less accurate connections between the console and controllers. But for practicing at home and playing at your local, this baby will do just fine. In fact, if you're playing from a Switch 2, you'll be glad to know that the wired connection to the Switch 2 controller has slightly improved, though I'd still personally recommend you use Bluetooth connectivity, as this would eliminate the potential for latency issues in general. But either way, the only issue with build quality with either of these options falls back on the stick drift.
Good old stick drift. Can't live with it. Can't live with it.
It's inevitable that many of these alternatives will go through some wear and tear the more you compete with them. So, if you're looking for a more quality alternative, I'd recommend the 8BitDo Ultimate 2C. It's the most reasonably priced controller out of all the higher quality official controllers, and they utilize Hall effect joysticks. the same ones found in the fob controllers I mentioned earlier. Definitely the most quality option of any Pro Controller equivalent. I personally don't have much to say on this controller considering I've never owned one, but I've only heard good things and it seems to be the best quality option for its affordability. There's also the alternative of seeking out a Pro GCC or a Pro Gamecube controller, which is essentially all the benefits of a fob controller modified into a Switch Pro controller, though I'd consider this option a bit obsolete since these controllers were developed when the 8-bit DOE controller hadn't released yet, and they also offer just about the same value of a Pro GCC. Oh wait, fuck, I can't say that so fast. They offer just about the same value as a Pro GCC at the most reasonable price. So overall, like I said earlier, choose the option that best fits your preferences. Alright, congratulations! You made it through the most long-winded portion of the video. Let's move on to the other stuff. After considering the options that lower input latency within Smash itself, it's important to not let that effort go to waste by putting yourself in front of a display that has some type of ridiculous response time. Smash Ultimate was designed to output a constant 60 FPS, which is the standard for most fighting games. And while every display will be able to run the game, it's worth mentioning that making adjustments to your display won't directly impact your gameplay specifically, but rather enhance it, with better displays making the game feel snappier and more fluid. It's important to mention that displays are a component to a Smash Bros setup that will always be inconsistent in some capacity. While this video considers all the options you can control in your own environment at home, they're not comparable to the display you'll find yourself playing on at a local or at a large-scale tournament. And while some places offer setups of their own with similar monitors or televisions of similar quality for each setup, some just don't. And it falls back on the community that acquires various equipment to keep these tournaments running smoothly. So do keep that in mind. Not every setup is going to be ideal, which is why practicing is so important to incorporate into some of your spare time, to fall back on muscle memory of certain combos and character mobility rather than accuracy of how the game feels at times. Every display comes with a set list of speculations that tell you a bit about the overall quality of that display as a whole. If you happen to be more unfamiliar with these details, you'll most likely be fixated on the more prominent details like the resolution or the color depth, or some other factor that boasts about the display's picture quality, which are things that we're not really going to be focusing on today. The one most prominent factor to focus on when it comes to displays has to do with its refresh rate. A display's refresh rate represents the amount of times that a display can update images shown on screen per second, being represented in hertz, which is its units of measurement. In this context, the higher refresh rate, the better. The most common refresh rates are 60, 120, and 144 Hz, and one prominent issue people make is not focusing on this spec. In fact, higher resolution displays seem to add to the response time despite having a higher refresh rate. This is just one factor that can directly impact your overall performance in Smash, as it leads you to misjudge the game's overall pacing and general movement on lesser quality displays, especially in comparison to when you actively switch from one display to another when playing a game. If you've ever felt like you've seemingly played better on one specific setup over another, the differences in the display the console's hooked up to could be a significant factor in that. So, keeping that in mind, be sure to take the steps needed to find out what refresh rate your display has. While some players can notice a higher refresh rate with the naked eye, others might not be able to. Or they might not even realize that they have the option for having a higher refresh rate, but don't have the option enabled. I'm being so serious, this happens more than you think. While it's important to mention that Smash Ultimate doesn't perform above 60 FPS, having a quality display that's capable of outputting a higher refresh rate will always be better than having a display that underperforms that standard. Nintendo Switch 2 users also have the option of going into the settings and enabling both 120Hz mode and enabling auto low latency mode. That will also enhance your gameplay experience. If you're in the scenario where you have a capable computer monitor but use a TV instead, maybe it's time to make that switch if you learned what the monitor is capable of. Maybe you're in the position where your TV is the only current option, and that's okay. There's still things you can do to reduce that response time, such as going into your TV settings and enabling low latency or gaming mode, turning off other options like image smoothing, disabling power saving mode, using HDMI 2.0 if your TV has it. The list can go on. A quick search on your TV and how to optimize it for gaming is the most simple and effective option to enhance your experience. So do yourself that favor and take the time to adjust that. And these same things apply to monitors, by the way. Every TV and monitor is a bit different, but it isn't always fully suited with the best options straight out of the box. Be sure to turn off settings like FreeSync, motion blur reduction, and set the monitor's response time to fast if you happen to have these options. But overall, there's no point in guessing. Just take your time with these settings and it'll pay off in the long run. And with that, we've gone through just about all the external factors you can consider when improving your setup for competitive Smash Ultimate. If you're a Vivid Online competitor, stay tuned for the following video going up on this channel, where I'm going to be discussing how you can achieve the absolute best setup for playing the game's online mode in both official and non-official ways. So, was there something that I missed while writing this video? Leave a comment and let me know. But do share this video with someone who's taking interest in learning competitive Smash. But overall, I hope you learned something. And as always, thanks for watching.